Very little introduction. Nathan Deal was practicing law for 23 years, and he spent 12 years in the state Senate and 9 terms in the U.S. Congress. During his first term as governor, Georgia's economy became the focus of his energy, and he takes credit, obviously, for the state becoming ranked #1 place to do business by more than one organization. In 2012, he launched a strategic jobs-focused initiative which aimed to increase economic development and workforce training. In 2014, he increased education funding by $500 million, the largest increase in 7 years. Please help me welcome Nathan Deal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Walter. That was the most factually correct statement made by a journalist about me in modern times. And I thank you for that. I'm glad to be back with you at the Atlanta Press Club again this year. I'm going to hit a few highlights in the process before I sign a piece of legislation, and I'll explain that to you in just a minute. You know, as we started this past legislative session, as I met with my staff and I met with key leaders within the General Assembly, there were some goals and purposes that we wanted to try to achieve. We thought that it was important that we provide insurance coverage for children with autism. We thought it was important that we try to bring our medical refugee families and their children who were in Colorado back home. We thought it was time to rescue children from chronically failing schools. And we thought it was time for the state of Georgia to improve our transportation infrastructure, which had been in a state of neglect for quite a while. Now, after the session is over with, and we have the chance to look back on that session, I think we can say that we have successfully climbed that Mount Everest. And we visit today to review just a few of those for your consideration. To the members of the General Assembly who are here today, I thank you for your help and for your votes and for your leadership that made these achievements possible. Now, as the House and Senate chambers were gavelled to a conclusion on sine die, we won't get into when that happened, I turned to members of my staff and I told them, I said, you know, I believe this is the most successful session that we've had since I've been governor. And I truly believe that. I believe that many of the achievements of this session are historic and that they will be looked back upon and celebrated in the years to come. Now, it takes a lot of hard work to produce legislation, some of which is somewhat controversial. But through their diligence and their hard work, these things occur. They did it with passion, they did it with deliberation, but most importantly, they did it in deliberative debate with a goal in mind. Let's achieve the goal that we set. Now, we've done a lot of things. We've worked closely together, and I think that people in both parties in this year can claim that they had a part in this process. Republicans, they could show real results in health care, education, and transportation. And Democrats, who comprise roughly a third of the legislature, can be proud and tell their constituents that they played a role in what got passed because they were willing to work with the other side of the aisle instead of just being obstructionists. Together, these things were accomplished. Without a single dissenting vote, we passed what came to be known as Ava's Law, House Bill 429, after multiple sessions and a balanced discussion and careful study, and I have just signed House Bill 429 into law about an hour or so ago at the Capitol. This law will now ensure that many children with autistic spectrum disorder will receive the early therapy that they need at a critical development stage in their life. And a powerful example of grassroots effort by the families whose children were afflicted with these problems was manifested in that piece of legislation. And I'm a firm believer because I have seen the results. And I actually saw Ava today. She was there for the signing ceremony, a bright young girl who, without the treatment that she received, probably would have not have been functional enough to attend that ceremony. So I am pleased. And we did it with resolve, and it's often difficult when you're dealing with issues of mandated coverage and insurance policies to find the number of votes that you need to make that happen. Now, like the story of Ava Bullard, who at 2 years of age could not speak a word, she didn't respond to her name. She didn't play with her toys. She didn't react with her peers or parents. And she didn't even appear to recognize the members of her family that were closest to her. Without the intensive therapy that she received, the kind that this particular bill will now require insurers to cover for children under the age of 6, Ava would be in a special education class and might have been dependent on the state for her support for the rest of her life. Instead, she is now a happy, healthy, well-adjusted, and creative young lady, and has a promising future that lies ahead. Georgians will hear similar stories in the coming years as more children receive the kind of treatment that they need early on and the treatment that they deserve. So I was proud to sign Ava's law today. And I know that the lives of children like Ava and their families is going to be better because of that legislation. Now, another area in which I know will make a difference in the lives of children is referred to as Haley's Hope Act. That is the famous House Bill 1, which I signed earlier this month. Over the course of the long journey to passing this monumental piece of legislation, I hope that many of you have been able to witness and be inspired by the loving devotion of the families of these children who were suffering from seizure disorders and the kind of successes that they believe will be possible as a result of this legislation. It was perhaps the most cheers that I have ever heard or seen in the signing of a piece of legislation when we signed House Bill 1. And as a result of that, families are now being reunited back here in Georgia. Children are finally able to begin to lead happy lives and be where they belong in their home state of Georgia. When the process first began, Haley's mother, Janae, said that she could not see her daughter in her daughter's eyes. And today, now that Haley has received the proper treatment, she begins to see that spark of life coming back into her eyes. Now, the medication doesn't fix everything. Haley doesn't ride bikes or play basketball. She doesn't run around the yard or dance around like other children her age. But she is no longer enduring hundreds of seizures each day. That's progress worth celebrating. You know, we could say that the theme of this session has been helping children. Now, there's one piece of legislation which I view in the same vein. It is not viewed that way by some in the established education community, and that is regrettable. It is the Opportunity School District, which, because of the courage and the hard votes made by the General Assembly, 2/3 of the House and the Senate was required to be able to put this on the ballot for the people of this state to vote on in 2016. But because of that, I think there's an opportunity to say that we are no longer going to be satisfied with a status quo that condemns children to a future that is blighted by the lack of educational opportunity. Now, some would argue that local control is needed and that this is a hopeless situation that we're taking on. They argue that if all you need to do is put more money into failing schools, even though we have put more money into failing schools and the results have not changed. I reject all of that. I believe that every child can learn, and I believe they have the potential for academic success. And if we do not properly invest in these young minds on the front end, we will far too often pay for their prison beds on the tail end. I'm proud to say that our criminal justice reforms are working, but I would be even more proud if we can see that those reforms are no longer necessary to the extent that we have had to employ the remedies. Now, some critics say that failing to read the legislation, I believe they didn't read it actually, they call for saying that what we are trying to do is not worth doing. They fail to see the positive results that are already on display in some systems in our state that are vowing that their schools will not be in the chronically failing school list. Now, I applaud them for that. I think that they understand that they can institute better practices for educational delivery and that they can excel in their scholastic accomplishments. Now, these are not the kind of schools that would be subject to coming under the Opportunity School District. If they are showing signs of progress, then all of us want to encourage that. It is only those where nothing is happening. They're not achieving. In fact, in some cases, they're going backwards. So, it will not be a machete-like approach to education. It will be very precise. It will be a scalpel that will be applied to the most difficult, the most failing schools in our state. And I think it's quite honestly time for that to happen. And I believe when the voters in next year have the opportunity to express their opinion, they will agree with me and the majority of the members of the General Assembly. Now, you know, the Charter School Amendment, which passed in 2012, I think demonstrated the fact that parents do want a choice for the lives of their children. And this new amendment that's going to go before the voters next year will also need buy-in from stakeholders at every level across our state. Together, I believe we can dispel the untruths and the harmful disinformation that has been propagated by special interest groups who have arrayed themselves against the Opportunity School measure. I believe together we can build a bridge to a brighter future for these children because there are good teachers who want their children to have better opportunities. And I believe we can make that happen. It does take the community to be involved and committed, and I believe we will be pleasantly surprised at how many will actually want to be a part of that process. Now, the General Assembly has also heard and answered the call of our deteriorating transportation system. Many thought that our goals were unrealistic and that the leaders of the legislature from their study committee that said that we needed $1 billion just to maintain the current state of our transportation infrastructure, they thought we would never be able to achieve that. Although its true revenues have grown steadily since I took office, we still had a deficit in terms of the amount of money needed to bring our transportation infrastructure to the level that it needed to be. So, when we first met to discuss this and to look at the revenues that were available. Most of those dollars that were available by the growth of our revenue in our state were already committed. They were committed to entitlement programs, namely Medicaid and education itself. Those were siphoning off virtually all of the growth in our revenue for the state budget. So, in order to be able to achieve what we needed to, there needed to be some extra money. Now, as a result of this decreased revenue and inappropriate attention to our infrastructure, we've seen much of it fall into great need of repair. And despite the political potholes, if you'll pardon the pun, and the fierce debate that always ensues anytime you talk about taxes, I think we have secured a transportation bill that will, here again, pave the way to a safer and more prosperous Georgia. Our state budget is able to meet our top priorities because we have a careful focus on creating and keeping good jobs in Georgia. Transportation is a large and important point when we're trying to recruit businesses to come to Georgia. If they're manufacturers, they want to know that they can get their raw materials in and their finished products out in a timely fashion. House Bill 170, the transportation bill, was a result of compromise, bold leadership on the part of the members of the House and the Senate, and courage on the part of the individual legislators who voted and supported it. I believe that our communities will be better off in the long run, and more importantly, it will help keep our citizens safe and allow us to do such things as repair bridges. I just hasten to long-standing association with the University of Georgia. His recognition of excellence at the University of Georgia as an instructor and as a mentor was exceptional. I told them that I thought of the two that they asked me to interview, that Jerry Moorhead was, I thought, the better candidate. Once again, they did accept that recommendation, and Jerry Moorhead was appointed. Here again, if the Board of Regents did not want my opinion, they shouldn't have asked me for it. And if Mr. Neesmith is disappointed in the selection of Hank Huckabee or Jerry Moorhead, he should be man enough to say that that's his problem. I think he knows that the Board of Regents has received great acclaim for the selection of both of those individuals. And I dare say, at this point in time, he does not want to put himself on that side of the ledger. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say, I'm glad Bluestein went first. Governor, you're poised to name 3 new Court of Appeals judges, and that'll give you the opportunity to leave a significant and lasting impression on the appellate bench. What kind of folks are you looking for those judges? What impression do you hope to leave? How would you like to mold the court?
Well, I think the best thing any governor or anyone who has powers of appointment can do is to try to select the best qualified and the best individual for any position that they're appointed to. I think that's especially important in positions like appellate judges. Even though they are technically elected by the people of this state, as most of you know, it is a rare occasion when a sitting judge is defeated at the ballot box. So I think a governor has a special responsibility to make good choices and good judgment calls. I am pleased with the individuals that I have had the opportunity to appoint, one to the Supreme Court of Georgia and others to the Court of Appeals. I think these individuals are the kind of people that I think will serve our state well, not only in the short term, but in the long term. And in most instances, the judges on our appellate courts do serve for a very long period of time.
Governor, what do you think of the new ethics executive director for the State Ethics Commission? And also, during the campaign, during your re-election campaign, you made ethics reform a big priority. You talked about overhauling the commission. this past legislative session went by, we saw a little bit of an increase in the funding, but no overhaul. Can you address some of those critics that say that more needs to be done to make the State Ethics Commission independent and more functional than it's been in the past?
Well, first of all, my budget doubled the revenue flowing to the Ethics Commission. I think that was a significant manifestation of my support for the efforts of that agency. The final version did not include quite that much in the final bill, but my budget recommendation did. Now, I do not know personally the new individual who's been appointed as the director of that body. I do know him by reputation. He's been a long-serving member of state government and serving in various capacities, representing various agencies in his capacity as an attorney for the Secretary of State's office, as I recall. He appears to be qualified, and I certainly wish him the very best. With regard to further structural reform, that is, to expand the membership of the Commission itself, I received requests from the existing members of that Commission saying, please do not do that now. We are trying to sort through and put in place competent staff, and we do not necessarily need additional members. We needed staff, and as you know, that's what the money was primarily used for. I felt like, in good conscience, that they were showing significant progress in dealing with the backlog of cases which had been there for far too long. I felt like it was the only responsible thing to do was to give them appropriate time to see if, with new personnel and with additional inflow of money, which will allow them to upgrade their information technology system, which much of the money will be used for that. We'd already put money in for that in previous budgets. I felt like they needed an opportunity in a sufficient period of time to see if they could deal with the issues. It's primarily the issues of timely adjudication of claims that have been submitted or complaints that have been filed with the Commission. Now, if there's a problem that persists, and if members of the General Assembly believe for next year that the makeup of that Commission needs to be expanded, it will certainly be a topic that I will be agreeable to entertain discussions about. But these are people who serve in a very difficult role at no pay. In fact, if you had to ask for volunteers, you'd probably have a very difficult time finding people who wish to volunteer for that kind of service. So I felt like, in respect to their service, they needed an opportunity to see with the new staffing and the new funding what the results would be.
Governor Deal, can you talk a little bit about your appointment of Larry O'Neill to the Tax Tribunal judgeship, given that he doesn't appear to have been on the short list from the Judicial Nominating Commission?
Well, when I understood that he was interested in that position, I asked the Judicial Nominating Commission if they would interview him, and the co-chairs of that commission did do so.